Good morning, lady bosses. 10 o'clock Tuesday morning. Donna Manley here. Happy to be sharing this time with you again. I'm just going to wait a minute because I hate to wait too long because I always feel like that's so disrespectful for people who listen to the replay. So I'll at least give it till 10:01 and then we'll get rolling and get started. Okay, one person here, and I don't know who it is yet, but I'm going to guess that it's Rachel because she's always like one of the first. She's always the first one on. So if it's you, hi Rachie. I'm not sure if it is or not. Okay, we'll give it just down about 12 more seconds. Somebody else is here. Oh, I can see pictures. I can see it's Rachie and 3 people on. I can't tell by the little icon who it is. Okay, 10:01. Let's get rolling. So, sorry I missed you last week. It's been a couple of weeks, but I think what happened is with everything that's going on in our nation over the last few weeks. Oh my gosh, it feels like it was yesterday and it feels like it was a year ago. I just felt like it was appropriate to just take a minute and pause and just think about stuff. I've really found that necessary for myself, and I'll tell you why. I want to tell you where I was before 3 weeks ago and what my thinking always was. And listen, this is coming from a place of a person who has never in her life considered herself a racist. I am totally, all my life making statements like, I don't see color. And I really don't in the definition of looking at people as people and not looking at them or classifying them or anything else according to what they look like. Never considered myself racist. But in the past, when I would hear people say Black Lives Matter, my response was always, all lives matter. My response when I heard people talking about white privilege was very defensive. Like, I'm not privileged. You can't say that about all whites. I'm not privileged. I've had nothing in my life handed to me. I've seen really hard times. I've seen really good times, but I've worked my ass off for anything I have. Nothing's been handed to me. That's how I defined white privilege. When I saw the taking of the knee at the football game years ago now, my reaction to that was the disrespect to the flag, therefore to our country, therefore to Americans, therefore to veterans who fought and gave their lives so we could be free. All I saw was disrespect to all that. So, your perception is reality. Whatever it is you think and why you think it, that is your reality. And I didn't know anything any differently. And I'll get into the reasoning of that. But bottom line, if you don't know any differently, then you're not opening yourself up to hearing anything different. And I want to say, maybe I'll say it right out the gate, but that's something that's really important. You're never going to think any differently if you don't ever entertain the idea that people feel differently than you for different reasons. And let's be a little bit open to hearing the other side of things sometimes so we can make really good decisions. But bottom line, these are the places I was coming from. And here's what I'm understanding through all this is that when we hear those statements, if we're quick to counter those statements with statements like all lives matter or don't kneel, respect the flag, if we're always trying to correct what the Black community is saying to us, that, my friends, is a big part of the problem, is always trying to correct them. Because if you're just correcting them and trying to prove yourself right, you're not willing to listen to what they're saying. So listening, we all need to learn how to listen better. It's how often do you listen? And while you're listening, all you're doing is, working up your response or thinking about what you're going to say next. Let's learn to shut that off and truly listen with an open mind, with an open heart. You might not agree. And you know what? Chances you're not going to agree with everybody. We're all so different and we have such different viewpoints and opinions about everything. But listen with the intent of understanding. You can totally understand where someone's coming from without agreeing with them, right? And, we're grown-ups, we're adults. Isn't that like part of adulting? We're not in the playground anymore trying to beat each other up because we don't agree on something. Let's be open to the fact that we all think a little bit differently, but let's listen to understand, not just listen to, formulate our response. And if you don't do that and you're always countering with those kinds of responses, understand that all you're doing is stirring the pot. It's just like getting political about anything else. I know we have free speech. I know that, we live in a country where we can say whatever we want. Social media has made us very reckless about that. If your beliefs are very aligned in a certain way and it's very different and very controversial and very heated when it is spoken about, my recommendation is if you want to talk about those things, talk about them in a safe place where you're talking to people that you're safe with, who can understand that you're expressing how you feel, but they don't have to agree with you, where you can equally express your feelings, whether you agree or not. But to just throw your feelings out there on social media, all you're doing is stirring the pot. You're creating dissidence. You're creating anger. You're stirring the pot. You're not accomplishing anything. That blasting All Lives Matter on Facebook is not going to change the way anybody feels about it. There are probably a lot of people who agree with you, but all you're going to do then is stir the pot and get people more upset. And if we're striving for peace, why are we going to keep creating all this fighting, all this, constant fighting, screaming, yelling at each other? And it gets ugly. It gets so ugly. Why do we want to do that? So peace is never going to exist until you stop stirring the pot. So keep your heated opinions to yourself if you really want peace in the world. It starts with you. We've heard that all the time. Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. It's only going to start with you, so stop stirring the pot. Here's a post that perfectly illustrates what I'm saying. I saw this yesterday. Here's a post. It says, how about all lives matter? Not black lives, not white lives. Get over yourself. No one's life is more important than the next. Put your race card away and grow up. How is any part of that statement going to make anything any better? How is any part of that statement going to move us toward peace? Now listen, some of the stuff being said here is totally accurate. Of course, no one's life is more important than the next. Maybe that's why we need to start listening, because that's not what anybody's saying. Nobody's saying anybody's life is more important than anyone else's. But making statements like that are hateful. You think you're just expressing your opinion, but it's hateful. You're alienating people. You're getting people angry. You're stirring the pot. This is not going to move us any closer to a peaceful world. You're just making it worse. So if you're doing stuff like this, please stop in the name of peace. I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm just asking you to stop stirring the pot and stop fueling the fires of hate and racism. This kind of stuff is fueling the fires of racism. You might not think it is, but bottom line, it comes down to listening. You're listening, you're interpreting something one way. It may not be meant that way at all. So I saw another little illustration somebody mentioned, and I thought this was great. They just described that there are two universes. There is the physical universe, and then there is the universe that is in your head. And every one of us lives in a different universe in our heads. And we have a different reality. We have a different perspective on things. That creates a different reality, and it affects all our actions. It affects all our responses to things. So part of finding peace and understanding is realizing and accepting that. It's kind of what I just said, but stop trying to change people's minds, but start trying to understand them a little bit better. So this is why I wanted to take a couple weeks off and just reflect, because I realized things are really bad and maybe I need to understand things a little bit better. And all the things that I had thought in the past weren't accurate or weren't right, and maybe certainly weren't right for me. So, Black Lives Matter. I always felt the need to respond with all lives matter. I always felt that way. I've come to understand that that's not what it means. It doesn't mean Black lives are more important. It doesn't mean they matter more than us. But it means that there's a crisis. There's a crisis in this nation for Black people. And it's huge right now, but it's always been there. And you can't make a statement like all lives matter until we're all on a level playing field. And ladies, we're not on a level playing field. We're not on a level playing field from a racial standpoint, from a gender standpoint. Listen, women aren't, after all these years, women aren't even on a level playing field yet with men. And, you know, I don't know if that'll ever happen, but we've certainly gotten a lot closer today than we were in the 70s, right? I mean, I've seen that. I was graduating from high school in the 70s. So I've seen huge strides for women. But are we still on a level playing field? Absolutely not. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are today, but I know a few years ago, the numbers were that women still make 75 cents on the dollar compared to men. So we're not on a level playing field in any area of life. So you can't just make a blanket statement, all lives matter, until we're on a level playing field. Instead, understand that what they're saying is Black lives matter because Black people are in a place of crisis. There are a lot of changes that need to be made for racism in this country to start to diminish. So I understand that now. I understand what they're saying. Listen, it's no different than walking up to people standing outside and protesting outside an abortion clinic and saying, you know, my life matters too. Well, yeah, of course it does. Nobody said it didn't. But they're there for the purpose of propagating the message that unborn children's lives matter too. Okay, so we're not saying there's any exclusion. Yeah, all lives matter, but keep it to yourself. We all know all lives matter. We all know that I am not any more important than you or Tom or Harry or Dick or Black people or Hispanic people. I know that. We all know that. You don't need to say that. Right now, there's a crisis, and that's what that's addressing. Okay, so let's just understand that. You don't have to agree, but let's just start to understand a little bit better. The white privilege thing, I totally misconstrued what that meant. Totally misunderstood. I really thought it meant that there was this implication that because I was white, I had things handed to me. I didn't understand that it meant that as a white person, I didn't have to be afraid if a policeman pulled me over on the side of the street. I mean, I am sometimes, but it's just because I don't want to get a ticket. I don't want to get yelled at. But I'm not getting pulled over because I'm white. I didn't understand how much fear there is for a Black person, and more so a Black man, to be afraid of being pulled over simply because he's Black. And that after he's pulled over, okay, so often there's just the assumption, and this is the prejudiced way people think, is that there's going to be something to find. If you're Facebook friends with me, I posted this article about a woman who had it was just a recent story. There was a washer repairman. There was a repairman with a washer. And in the light of all that happened, she asked him, being a Black man, like, what has your experience been? And he said he lived, I think it was South Carolina, maybe Myrtle Beach, but I forget how many times, either a day or a week, he would get pulled over routinely. He's driving a business truck that's all, marked up, labeled and all that. But on a regular basis, it was either 6 times a week. It couldn't have been 6 times a day, but it might have been 6 times a week. It wasn't any less than that. How many of you white ladies get pulled over 6 times a week? That's white privilege. He's getting pulled over just because he's Black. And then they start searching the truck and they start checking everything out. He said he had to totally stop doing any repairs for anybody at nighttime because it's just too dangerous for a Black man to be out at night, because even worse assumptions are going to be made if he's out at night. I never understood that every single day in this country in the year 2020, that this was still as big of a fear as it is. I have a girlfriend that I graduated from high school with, and I just saw her post the other day. She was married to a Black man, and she has, 4 or 5 children. And her son, when he was 18, was standing on a street corner talking to his buddy. His buddy had committed a crime that I don't think even knew about. But the police stopped, and they arrested her son, and he went to jail for 18 months. And he wasn't even guilty. I mean, we hear about people being arrested and lots of times unjustly, but we don't hear about white people being pulled over just because they're white. They're being stopped just because they're black, and it's like, we'll attach a crime later. But he served 18 months of his life, and when he got out, they declared that he was innocent. They realized that he was innocent, but he was an 18-year-old kid who lost 18 months of his life that he'll never get back. That's not fair. And, take it beyond the black. I mean, I have another dear friend whose husband's a detective, and she came from law enforcement too. They've been victims of crime because he was a cop. They had their house burnt down to the ground, lost everything, including pets, because her husband was a detective and he wasn't even involved in the case of the woman who burned their house down. It was her son, but it didn't matter. He represented the police force. They burned their house down. Do you know what kind of fear she lives in every day when he goes to work? Every spouse of a police officer today lives in fear when they leave the house. No different than every mother of a black son. The fear that they feel every time they leave the house that I didn't understand. I didn't understand until I started listening, and I just didn't know how universal and prevalent it was. And it just breaks my heart. I thought we were better than that. I thought we were farther along than that. But that's the reality of it. The reality of the taking the knee at the football game. I totally misunderstood the intention of that. I mean, if it was all those things that I thought, if it was disrespect to our flag and disrespect to our veterans, that wasn't why it was done. It was done to try and portray, to try and relay a message that maybe that was one of the most opportune times and places for it to be heard, because we're not hearing each other. We're not hearing the cries of people who aren't being treated fairly. And maybe this was just the way to get that audience. I don't know, but I know I wasn't hearing it. I wasn't hearing it. I was just seeing the news, seeing bits and pieces, and we don't even have to go to how bad the media can be and how easily it shapes what we think and what we hear. The media tells us what it wants to tell us. We take that, we believe it on some level, and then we start seeing people talking about it. And so this becomes our belief. But we never go to the source and really listen. Oh my gosh, this is something that drives me crazy today. I don't care if it's this current racial situation or politics or whatever. How many times I see a post on Facebook where people are so upset about this headline they read. And so I'll open it up and I'll read it. And I can't tell you how many times the article that I read in no way supports the headline. There's total contradiction. The headline isn't even accurate for the article it's headlining. So how can we take this and make it our truth? We need to dig deeper. We need to understand more. So I didn't understand this. And it breaks my heart that a mother of a black child has to be afraid every time they go out of the house, and how they have to teach them how to be polite, how to react when the cops come. There was another article, I think, I don't know where this guy went to school. This was a college professor, and he was on his way to school to teach a class, and he stopped to grab something to eat, and immediately the cops came over to him on the street, pulled him over, started talking to him. Who are you? Where are you from? He said, well, I live in such and such a neighborhood. Well, how'd you get here? He's like, I drove. Like, where's your car? And is that your car? And show me proof that that's your car. And well, we just had a complaint over a neighborhood over that, there was a crime committed, and it was a black guy with a cap. That was all the description, black guy with a cap. And he's pulled over. He's got his badge hanging there and everything else. He was scared to death. He said there was no way I was going to get in that car, because he was scared to death of dying, not of getting a ticket, not of going to jail. That's white privilege. He was afraid of dying, because how often does that happen when black people are stopped just for being black? It's so scary and it's so heart-wrenching. So what can we do? So bottom line is, we've all been hearing all this stuff, but what can we do if we want to make the world a better place? If we want to move toward peace? I've learned and I've listened and I realized there are things we can do. Number one, educate yourself. Don't just take what you hear and listen to what your friends say and have this warped idea or this one-sided idea, not necessarily warped because, hey, we all have our own realities and our own perception, but this one-sided idea of what a situation is. Educate yourself, okay? Even if it's politics. If you love Trump, listen to some of your Democrat friends. If you love Biden, listen to some of your Republican friends. You don't have to change your mind, but if you want to understand, just understand where they're coming from, because I have friends on all sides of the political fence, and they're good people and they're intelligent people. So yeah, there are intelligent people on both sides of that fence. They have different perception, a different idea of what's going on. And all of this is the same thing. So educate yourself. There are movies you can watch. There's one called 13 on Netflix, and I haven't seen that yet. I want to see that, but I did watch When They Hear Us. Oh gosh, did I say that right? When they see us. When They See Us. It's also on Netflix. It's like a mini series, but I've watched it twice now because I watched it with my mom a couple weeks ago. But it's based on the true story of the Central Park Five. If you remember, I don't know if it was late 80s, when the woman jogger was attacked, raped, brutally raped in Central Park. New York had apparently had such a crime spree and crimes weren't being solved. And so when this happened, they were desperate to show the people that they were in charge, that they could close this down quick and, get the offenders and put them in jail. So they just randomly arrested 5 kids. 3 of them were black, 1 was Middle Eastern, 1 was Hispanic. Randomly. These kids were anywhere from 14 to 16 years old. The oldest was 16. The rest were all under 16, 14 and 15. These kids were good kids. These were kids who were good at their schoolwork. They were, one of them played an instrument. One of them went to a private school, really smart, really good kids. They had good families. They were good kids. But they were so desperate to shut this down that they just grabbed the first 5 kids they could and took them in for questioning. I mean, they're questioning these 14, 15-year-olds. Like, so tell us about when you raped this woman. And the kid just looked at them and said, rape? Is that like sex? Like, they didn't even know what they were talking about. It was heartbreaking. They all 4 went to juvie, 1 went to jail. 16-year-old good boy went to jail. And I'll have to tell you, in 24 hours, he was brutally beaten, brutally raped over and over. And when you watched every time he came up for parole, first thing they want to know is, are you remorseful for what you did? And he said, I am not going to answer that because I didn't do the crime. And he served his full sentence because he would not tell them what they wanted to hear. He could have told them any time and gotten out because he was being a good kid. He was being a good kid in prison and doing everything he had to do. They all served their terms. It was heartbreaking to watch some of these young kids get out, and they had to go for jobs. And now they're also sexual offenders. They all have to be registered as sexual offenders. And this kid has to fill out an application for a job. He doesn't have a clue. These kids didn't even get to go to high school. Now they got to fill out a job application. Like, their lives were taken from them. And at the end, one of the kids, the one who was in the adult prison, crossed paths with the actual rapist. And the actual rapist met him, and he was kind to him. The kid who was unjustly accused was kind to the rapist, and the rapist came forward and confessed. So after they were all released, the crime was confessed, and they were all acquitted. But they lost so many years of their lives simply because they were in the right place, they were the right color, and the whole thing was shut down because they just wanted to shut that down. Heartbreaking, and it happens a lot. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen to white people, but it doesn't happen to white people because they're white. It might happen because you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and maybe there's circumstantial evidence. Maybe there are lots of reasons, but it's not because you're black. So to understand, the first thing you can do is really educate yourself. Talk to your black friends. If you have a black friend, have an honest conversation with them. One of my Facebook friends did a live a couple weeks ago. He said, we need to talk more. He said, and it goes both ways. He said, I've got to be willing to let you ask me the tough questions and not feel like you're attacking me or that you're racist, but understand with an open heart that you just truly want to understand. And we've got to be willing to hear what they say. So it goes both ways, but we have to have open hearts and understand each other better. So talk to your Black friends. Ask them what their experience has been. Ask them how you can make a difference, what you can do to make a difference. If you don't have any Black friends you hang out with all the time, you've probably got Black friends on social media. Read their posts. Start reading their posts, listening to the links and the videos that they're posting. Just open your mind to understand all this a little bit better. Change your language. How often when you're telling somebody a story or you're saying something, you say, I was in the store today and this Black man came up to me and he was so nice, and whatever you're saying, it could have been just a really nice story. Why did you need to mention that he was Black? Let's be aware of that, because that's small, but it's still a little bit, it's racial. No question about it. It's racial. You know, you don't say, hey, I was talking to this Irish woman yesterday, or hey, I was talking to whatever, but we do it with people of color. And let's stop doing that. Let's just stop doing that. We're just people. I mean, unless you're in a lineup or unless somebody's asking for a description of somebody, that's different. Otherwise, let's just take that out of our language. Like I said before, keep your opinions to yourself. Stop stirring the pot. If you're putting out an opinion that's causing people to get really upset and heated in the comments, maybe you shouldn't have posted it, because you're not creating a place of peace. You're creating and you're throwing fuel on the fire. So if you want to be the person that just keeps throwing fuel on the fire, well, you're doing a good job. But please stop. I mean, I hear people say, oh, I try not to say anything, but I just can't stand it anymore. I've got to get it out. I respect that and I understand it. Call a friend. Go have coffee with a friend and get it out there. Don't get it out on social media where you have a couple thousand friends and all you're going to do is stir the pot and throw fuel on the fire and create more hate and more division among people, because that's what you're doing. Start to understand that that's what you're doing. And finally, I heard another friend say this and I thought this was awesome. Amplify their voice. When you're seeing people explaining and you're listening to understand better, if it's on social media, share that. Share that. Amplify their voice. Let more people hear what they're saying, because the more we hear, the more we understand, the closer we're going to move to peace, right? And that's what we all say we want. So that's all I've got. Bottom line, we want a better world. It starts with us. So let's start listening. Let's start really listening to each other. Either I am not seeing it, but you ladies have been quiet today. So I hope that's good. I hope it just means wow, we're all just really thinking, because I don't have any comments coming up. Maybe I'll see some later. But listen, thanks for hanging out with me. Have a great week. We'll talk again next week.